אנחנו מוצאים את הספור עם זרה שמשון?
האם זה באמת סגולה בדוקה? הסגולה ללמוד בזה? מה? כן.
Erev Tov and good evening. Dober V'Etcher to everyone. Thank you for joining us. We're in the Zera Shimshon on Parsha Kedoshim. We are going to do Os Dalet in the Zera Shimshon, section number 4. And before we begin, we're going to take a look at one pasuk, a very well-known pasuk from the Parsha, from Parsha Kedoshim. This is in Vayikra Perak Yud Tes, pasuk Yud Zayin. Pasuk says, Lo sisna es achicha bilvavecha. Do not hate your brother in your heart. Hocheach tochiach es amisecha. You should rebuke to your friend, velosiso alav chet, and do not carry on him a sin. So this pasuk, of course, is the source in the Torah for tochacha, for letting someone know, telling someone, informing someone when they've done something wrong, and letting them know what they need to do to act in a more appropriate and a more Torah appropriate way, and what they need to correct their ways. The Zera Shimshon starts off with that pasuk again. Os Dalet, section 4, Parshas Kedoshim. The pasuk says, Hocheach tochiach es amisecha. You should rebuke to your friend or to your neighbor. Kfar darshu razal. The Chachamim Chazal already explained the double language of hocheach tochiach. Rebuke, you should rebuke. They already explained the repetitive language to mean afilu mea pa'amim. Even 100 times. Even if it takes 100 times telling a person what they're doing wrong, you should continue to help them and teach them and tell them what they need to do to change their ways and to improve their actions. Ve'od yesh lomar, and we can also say another explanation of why the Torah repeats the word rebuke. Hocheach tochiach. Here the Zera Shimshon says, let's bring in another idea. Sherov ha'pe'omim i'efsher shehachote yifrosh min hachet behochacha achas levada. It's in the majority of cases, it's impossible for a sinner to depart from the sin that he or she is committing with just one reprimand, with just one a statement of rebuke. That's not usually normally going to happen, that you just mention something to someone one time and they totally change their behavior. Ella betochacha harishona misorer belibo. Rather, the first time you mention it, it lights a little inspiration. It wakes up a thought of tshuva in the person's heart. Ve'achar kach betochachos acheros, and afterwards, with future other rebukes, with mentioning it again, poresh legamre, then the person will completely separate from the sin. So the Zera Shimshon is saying that in order to understand the double language, we need to know it's not just a numbers game. It's really functionality, and it's taking into account human nature. And so the Zera Shimshon says, human nature is such as that in most cases, for most people, if you mention them, tell them one time they're doing something wrong or they need to change their behavior in a certain way, they're probably not going to change their behavior immediately. However, that will be like an entree. That will be like an entering point, and you will have said something that gets them thinking. And then later on, when you mention it again, maybe that time it'll take effect, or maybe the next time, the future tochachos, the future mentionings and the future instructions that you give them about their actions will, now that their heart has been opened to this issue, will take effect later on. So we shouldn't expect that one time will be effective by itself. Then the Zera Shimshon continues, Ve'amru Razal, and the Chazal also said, Kol ahava she'ein ima tochacha, eina ahava. Any loving relationship that does not involve rebuke in the sense of constructive criticism, Eino ahava. Chazal say that's not a true love. If you truly love someone, then of course you're going to want them to act in the best possible way. You're going to want them to reach their highest spiritual potential. And so you're going to want to, it's going to need to require tochacha. You're going to need to occasionally mention to them that they're behaving in a way that they need to think about, that they need to rectify, that they need to correct and change. So that's another statement by Chazal. V'chein b'perek gimel de'arachin. Similarly, we see in the third parak of Meseches Arachin, Kama pa'amim loka Akiva ben Yosef v'chuli. This is a statement by Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri. And he says, how many times did I strike, meaning did I harshly criticize Akiva ben Yosef? V'chol shkein shehosef bi'ahava. And he loved me even more. In other words, he had a loving relationship of a student to a Rebbe before. And the more I criticized him, the more he loves me even more, the more I criticize him. And again, that's because this demonstrated the love that Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri had. If he didn't care, then he wouldn't have said anything. But his rebukes and his constructive criticism demonstrated his love, and therefore Akiva loved him even more because of the rebuke, which was he understood to be a way of helping him grow and improve. V'lochein amar hakosav. And therefore the pasuk says, so the Zera Shimshon is going to show us how this idea is inherent in the pasuk. Therefore the pasuk says, Hocheach, give rebuke. And when you see that your friend who you rebuked loves you even more after you rebuked him, in other words, he's appreciative. He understands why you're rebuking him, and he takes it in a positive vein, in a good way, and he understands you want to help him grow because you love him. If that's how your friend responds after the first rebuke, and that's how you know your first act of rebuke was a successful one. Even if the recipient has not yet stopped committing the sin, but you see that the recipient accepted your tochacha in a positive way and had a positive response to you, and appreciated your words of constructive criticism, tachzor lohochiach, then the Torah says, tocheach. So you have hocheach, tochiach, rebuke, and then rebuke again. Rebuke, evaluate the situation, and then rebuke again, shesofo lifrosh mimenu. Because in the end, your friend will depart completely from committing this Avera, as long as he accepted the first rebuke in a positive way and responded positively and understood this was part of a loving relationship. Aval, but im hatochacha harishona she'asisalo. If the first rebuke that you gave him, lo hayisakru yatochacha, it could not be called a successful rebuke. Shelo hosif lacha ela sina, and it only added hatred. Sometimes if you rebuke a person, they get angry, they get upset, they hate the person who rebukes them. They do not take the chastisement in a positive way, and they don't view it as a result of a loving relationship. Al derech, according to the way that's described in a pasuk in Mishlei, al tochach leitz pen yisna echa. Do not rebuke a fool or a jokester, lest he hate you. So the Zera Shimshon says you need to understand that not everybody receives tochacha in a positive way, and not everyone views it as part of a loving relationship. Sometimes you might rebuke a person and they're not serious enough, they're not mature enough, they're not interested in their own spiritual growth enough to take it in a positive way, and that's what the pasuk in Mishlei is referring to. Then what should you do? Oz lo sosif lo hochiach. then you should not continue to rebuke the person. Don't put yourself on automatic repetition. I'm rebuking you, and I'm going to call every day and rebuke you again until you change your ways. I'm rebuking you, and I'm going to call you again tonight and tomorrow night and the next day. That's not what the Torah wants. The Zera Shimshon says, "Az lo sosif lehochiach." Do not continue to rebuke someone unless they show you that they're taking it in a positive way. Shekishem shemitzvah lomar davar hanishma. The Zera Shimshon quotes paraphrases from a Gemara in Yevamos. Just like it's a mitzvah to say something that will be heard, it's a mitzvah to tell someone a rebuke and a criticism that they will listen to. Kach mitzvah shelo lomar. So too, it's equally a mitzvah not to say, to refrain from saying davar she'eino nishma, something that will not be listened to. And this, in this teaching, the Zera Shimshon is telling us that this mitzvah requires thought, and it requires subtlety, and it requires discretion and wisdom. If this was a straightforward black and white mitzvah, which we might have thought before learning the Zera Shimshon, it's black and white. You see someone doing something wrong, just keep telling them and so to speak, hitting them in the face with it over and over again. Not literally, obviously, not physically, but over and over again, repeating your criticism until they change their ways. No, the Zera Shimshon says that's not how it works. Hocheach tochiach is telling you, first do a hocheach, do it one time, then gauge the response. Think about the response, evaluate and assess the response. If it's positive, which doesn't mean the person necessarily changes his or her behavior. It just means that they show you, they demonstrate that they're appreciative of your concern and your effort. Then tochiach, then continue and work with them and guide them until they ultimately will certainly change their behavior. But if your first hocheach fails and it fails miserably, and the person is angry with you and resents what you said, and sina, hatred comes about, then stop. Don't continue to talk to them. Then stop saying anything, because then your words will not be listened to. Let us continue in the bottom of the column, next paragraph. Uvazeh yuvan hapasuk, and with this insight about the two stages in giving tochacha and giving constructive rebuke, we can now understand a pasuk in Mishlei. Poreya musar moes nafsho, v'shomer tochachas koneh lev. The pasuk in Mishlei says, one who rejects musar, someone who rejects teachings about rebuke, moes nafsho, he is disgusted with his own soul. And the pasuk continues, v'shomer tochachas, and someone who guards words of rebuke and finds them something precious and protects the words of rebuke, koneh lev, he is acquiring a heart. That's the pasuk. Zera Shimshon says, v'koshe. Right off the bat, we need to ask a question on this pasuk. Lama mitchilo amar nafsho, ulebasof lev. Why in the beginning of this pasuk in Mishlei does it talk about a person being disgusted nafsho with his own soul, and then another person who accepts rebuke and appreciates it and values it, koneh lev, acquires a heart? Why does the pasuk change from soul to heart? V'yesh lomar, and we can say shekavonas hakosov lomar, that the intent of the pasuk is to say, mishahu poreya musar, someone who rejects teachings about improving his or her behavior, shehu katz b'tochachas. This person is disgusted by rebuke. This person can't handle the truth. The person rejects tochacha, rejects musa, rejects people trying to tell him or her that he needs to change his or her ways. Noda shehu moes nafsho. It becomes known that this person is disgusted with his own soul. He's not interested in spiritual growth. Umishum hachi, and because of this, bachar lechelko, he has chosen for his share in this world, tavas gufanis, physical desires. This person isn't interested in spiritual growth. They're interested in materialism and physical pleasure. Vehamusar shehu litzorech nafsho, and the teachings that will help this person's soul grow and help the person grow spiritually, lo bachar bo. This person is not choosing to hear that. They're not interested in that. Aval misha hu shomer tochachas, but someone who finds precious and value and guards the words of Musar that they receive, shemekabel hatochach, and they receive the rebuke in a positive way. Af ki einenu adayin shomea eleha. This is so critical. Even if the person has not yet listened to what was being said, don't assume if a person doesn't listen right away and change his or her behavior right away, it means they're not interested. It means that there's no hope. No, don't think that. It's okay if they don't listen right away. Ve'eno lokeach mimeno musar hatov al midosav haraos. And the person does not immediately take the good words of Musar to heart and use them to change his bad character traits. Don't worry if the person doesn't act immediately on the words of Musar, of tochacha, of rebuke, of constructive criticism. Hoel v'kibla beratzon tov. Since the person received the words with goodwill, with a positive response, bevada yom echad yachzor b'tshuva, definitely one day he will return and repent with a full, sincere tshuva. So a person not only has to have wisdom and discretion, the Zera Shimshon is saying, he also has to have patience, be patient, be willing to give the person a long time to grow and internalize the message. Don't expect immediate results. Im kol zeh kana leiv. Even with all of this delay and the person not changing his behavior immediately, kana leiv, the pasuk is saying, he has taken your words to heart. Lefachos kana libo sheyishma hadvarim shel tochacha. His heart is acquiring the idea, as accepting the idea of listening to the words of rebuke. V'yom echad yizkareim v'yekaimim, and one day he will remember them and fulfill them and put them into action. So the Zera Shimshon uses the new pasuk in Mishlei to teach us and to reiterate to us this idea that tochacha is not an immediate process. It has two stages. A first stage of just seeing what an individual's response is, what the recipient's response is. That's represented by the first word in the pasuk, hocheach. And then you gauge their response, you evaluate it, and if it's positive, then you continue, and then ultimately you will have success as long as you have patience and wisdom and you're gentle and you give the person a chance to grow at his or her own pace. Next paragraph. Ubederech zeh yevuar ma'adik arsinim b'perakama de Megillah. In this way, meaning with this yesod, with this fundamental idea that the Zera Shimshon has established about tochacha, about giving musar, about giving rebuke and constructive criticism, we're also able to understand a totally different idea that the Gemara brings down in the first parak of Megillah about Torah study. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak said, Im yomar lecha adam, if a person says to you, Yogati v'lo matzasi, I struggled, but I worked hard, but I did not find success. Al ta'amein, do not believe the person. Okay, if a person says, I worked hard, but I did not find success, don't believe him. Now, we have to wait. We have to be patient ourselves to see what the Gemara is referring to, what kind of work and what kind of success. But right off the bat, our first statement from Rabbi Yitzchak is, if a person says, I worked hard and did not find success, don't believe it. Motzasi velo yogati al tamein. If a person says, I found success and I didn't have to work hard, don't believe him either. Yogati umotzasi. If I worked hard and I found success, ha'amein, then you can believe the person. Okay, so Rabbi Yitzchak's statement is, and again, we still don't know exactly what it's referring to, but Rabbi Yitzchak's statement is that certain things in this world can only be acquired through hard work, And if you do put in the necessary labor and effort, then you will succeed. But if you don't put in the necessary labor and effort, there's no way you will ever succeed. And that's what he's saying. Only believe the person who says, I put in the labor and I was successful. And don't believe a person if he says he put in the labor and work and wasn't successful, because in this regard, that's not possible. Let us continue. Vahani mili, and when were these words said? What is Rabbi Yitzchak referring to? B'divrei Torah. He's referring to words of Torah, to Torah study. Aval b'masa umatan, but if you're talking about business, siyata dishmaya hi. That requires the help of heaven, the assistance of heaven. So a person, when it comes to Torah, needs to work hard. And if they work hard in studying Torah, then they will be successful. They will not be successful if they don't work hard. But if they do work hard, then you can rest assured, and the person can rest assured that they will attain a higher level in Talmud Torah, in the study of Torah. They will be successful in their Torah study. But when it comes to business, it's possible to work really hard and not be successful. And it's possible, on the other hand, to not work hard at all and to be successful. It's dependent upon siyata dishmaya. It's dependent upon the assistance and the help from heaven. And it's not dependent directly on a person's amount of effort and labor that they do. Gemara continues, Uledivrei Torah, and even in relation to the study of Torah, lo amaran, this statement was not said ella lechadude, but in reference to a person's sharp understanding or clear understanding of words of Torah. When you talk about understanding what you're studying, that's where it's dependent upon your labor and your effort. Okome girsa, but if you're talking about something else, another aspect of study of Torah, which is that you should retain it and remember it and keep it with you for a long time, siyata dishmaya hi, then that is also has an element of siyata dishmaya. It's not just dependent upon a person's effort. It also requires the support and the assistance of Shamayim to be able to retain and remember one's learning long after they did the study. Virashi olav hashalom piresh siyata dishmaya hi. Rashi explained the words, the assistance of heaven, in reference to this maintaining Torah, maintaining one's memory and retention of the words of Torah. Deyesh sheyageya ve'eno motzei. Because it requires siyata dishmaya, it's possible to work hard at retaining one's Torah, at remembering it and keeping it and preserving it. And ve'eno motzei, and a person might not be successful because Rashi, that's how Rashi understands the point of the Gemara. It requires siyata dishmaya. It is not solely and only dependent upon a person's efforts. It also requires siyata dishmaya, and a person therefore might work hard and still not retain the words of Torah that they study to the degree that they would like to, unless they're given that extra siyata dishmaya. Umi devorav nira, and from Rashi's words it appears, the dafka tzorech liga or liyageya, that a person specifically needs to put in a lot of effort, v'kulei hai, and all of that comes with it. A person has to work hard and devote a lot of effort into the retention of, and to retaining their words that they studied of Torah, and then v'ulai, and then perhaps they'll be successful, and of course, perhaps not. Because the Zera Shimshon says, this is difficult. This idea from Rashi is difficult. Shahari nuchal lomar nami behefech. We might have suggested exactly the opposite. Ukemoshe pirisham harif. And just like the Rif comments on the Ein Yaakov, when he says, Sheyesh mi she'eno yogea umotze, he takes it in a different way. And he says, perhaps a person will not do hard work, umotze, and they will be successful. So Rashi focused on the possibility. And he said what the Gemara is teaching us is that a person might work really hard and not be successful in retaining his Torah study. But the Rif commentary on the Ein Yaakov, not to be confused with the great Rif Rabbi Yitzchak Alfasi commentary on the Gemara. This is a different person who lived later. This Rif says no. He understood it in a different way. The Zera Shimshon says he understood it to say that since it involves siyata dishmaya, a person could be successful even without working hard. So a person might retain his Torah knowledge because of siyata dishmaya, because of the gift of siyata dishmaya, assistance from on high, even if the person didn't work hard. So the Zera Shimshon, so the Zera Shimshon continues, Umi higid Rashi pirush zeh. Who told Rashi that only his explanation is right? The siyata dishmaya lo ba ela la'achar yagia. That siyata dishmaya doesn't come by itself. It only comes after hard work. It's an adjunct to hard work. You put in the hard work, and then you might also receive siyata dishmaya. Perhaps not, but the only way to get it, according to Rashi, is by first putting in the effort and the hard work. So the Zera Shimshon says, who told Rashi that's pshat? We don't see that clearly from this Gemara that you have to only explain it that way. Perhaps you can understand the Gemara the way that the Rif did. The Yesh Lomar, and we can say, Sha'adarabba kedei lidchos farazu, that just in the opposite way, the Gemara is going to teach us the opposite way from this alternative approach. Kedei lidchos farazu, in order to push aside this other alternative way of understanding the Gemara, different than the way Rashi did. And we'll see that now. The Gemara found it necessary in the 5th parak of Masechta Brachos, lahavi raya min hakasuk, to bring a proof from a pasuk. The Isa Hasam, it states over there in that Gemara, arba dvarim tzrichen chizah. 4 things require hard work, strong effort. 4 things require strong effort, v'chule, etc. And then the Gemara says that one of them is Torah. So the Gemara says, Torah minayon. From where do we know that studying Torah requires hard work? Shenemar, as the pasuk says, and this is a pasuk from sefer Yehoshua, rak chazak me'od lishmor lasos kechol haTorah. Only be strong, chazak, meaning strong, work hard. Me'od, very much, lishmor, to guard, lasos kechol haTorah, and to do according to all of the Torah. So the word lishmor here is understood, according to the Marsha on this Gemara and Brachos, is understood not to mean the often meaning of guard and keep the mitzvos, but rather lishmor, to study and retain your Torah learning. Chazak, be very strong. It's going to require chizuk. It's going to require a lot of effort. Vikasha, and we could ask a question: D'matzorech l'raya al zeh. Why did the Gemara need to bring up proof from a pasuk on this? V'halo pashudhu. It's obvious that the only way to understand and retain Torah knowledge is by putting in a lot of effort. Anyone who studies Torah knows that very often it's hard to understand what you're studying to begin with. And B, even after you understand it, if you want to retain it clearly in your mind, that's extra hard. Both of these things are obviously difficult. Everyone should know that it requires hard work. It's obvious that it's true. And then he quotes from the Yerushalmi, Yom ta'azveni, yomayim e'ezveka. If for one day you forsake your Torah study, then for 2 days it will forsake you. Right? You have to constantly work at your Torah study, and a person has to do that and constantly review in order to have any chance of understanding it and of retaining it. V'chein hakosav omer, and so too a pasuk says, hata'if einecha bo. If your eyes fly away from the Torah, from Torah study, then you won't be able to understand it and recall it. Ella, but from the fact that the Gemara and Brachos insisted upon bringing a pasuk to prove this idea, vadai, it's definitely true. The kavonas hatana lahodienu, the intent of the Tana over there was to teach us shetzarich chizuk l'Torah, that a person needs strengthening and hard work for Torah, af mi sheyesh lo siyata dishmaya, even a person who has assistance from heaven. Ve'al zeh sha'alu Torah minayan. And that's what the Gemara was asking about. How do we know that the study of Torah requires hard work? The dilma siyata dishmaya he. The Gemara was saying, the intent of the Gemara's question was perhaps understanding Torah and retaining it is a gift from Shemayim. And it's not a matter of hard work. It's a matter of having siyata dishmaya. Perhaps sometimes a person could understand and retain Torah knowledge without working hard. So the Gemara specifically brought a proof from a pasuk regarding Yehoshua. We know that he had incredible, tremendous support from heaven. Dichsiv, as the pasuk says regarding Yoshua, ki imcha Hashem Elokecha, Hashem, your God, is with you. So Yoshua had siyata dishmaya va'afilu hachi, and even so, Amar lo. Nonetheless, the pasuk quotes the words to him, Rak chazak ve'amatz me'od. You have to be very strong and courageous to guard the words of Torah, meaning to acquire them, to study them. It's going to require hard work, Yehoshua, even though you have siyata dishmaya. Umisham, and from there, Lomad Rashi olav Hashem. That's where Rashi learned Tam leperusho, the reasoning behind his explanation. Ve'lachein pirish, and that's why Rashi explained the yesh yageo ve'eno motze. That's why Rashi said it's possible to work hard and still not have retention of the words of Torah that one studied, because you need to work hard, and in addition to that, have the siyata dishmaya. You need both things. It's impossible without having both elements, the hard work and effort and the siyata dishmaya, in order to be successful. V'lo k'pirish harif, and this is not like the explanation, the alternative explanation given by Rabbi Yoshaya Pinto, the Rif. So let's just quickly recap. The Zera Shimshon here started with our pasuk, the pasuk in our Parsha Kedoshim about hocheach tochiach, about giving rebuke. And he taught us many important insights and lessons about how to give rebuke. And his central idea, not his only idea, but his central idea, is that the repetition of the two words tells us that it's a two-stage process. First, we start with a rebuke without too much. We just start with a rebuke to get a feel, to test the waters. If the recipient responds positively, then we go to tochiach, we go to the next word of rebuke and continuing, and we grow with the person, and we're patient, and we give them time, and ultimately they'll definitely do tshuva. However, when we test the water with one rebuke, with one hocheach, and it doesn't work, and the person gets angry and upset, then we stop, because it's a mitzvah not to say anything more once we see that we haven't received a positive response and the person's heart is not open to the words of rebuke. And we have to hope that perhaps someone else, a different person with a different relationship with this individual, will be able to communicate with them in a positive way and get them and help them to grow spiritually. Yasher koach to everyone who joined us this week, and we look forward to learning Zera Shimshon together again next week, God willing.